does someone want to present a motion? Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes that anyone wants to make? Go ahead, Jim.
There's a correction on the item 5E. But there's some typos in there on the draft language for the Rosemary Mulvetch plaque.
Let's see, 5E.
Okay, the 20216.
Yeah, 2003 to 2016,
Yeah.
and in appreciation.
Okay, we'll make that correction.
Thanks to legal counsel there, always having a sharp eye.
Absolutely.
So can I have a motion to pass the minutes as amended?
So moved.
Second, okay, all in favor?
Wait 1 second. So I have Jim Massey as making the motion. Who was second?
I think it was Paul.
I was, Paul.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any objections or abstentions? None seen. Okay. No presentations, so onto the regular agenda. 5A, Caltrain closure update.
Okay. I'll give a brief update and be available to answer questions. So at the last meeting, the committee received a presentation from Caltrain and HNTB regarding the Watkins Avenue safety improvements, 35% design. Since then, staff attended a diagnostic meeting with Caltrain, PUC, HNTB, who's Caltrain's consultant, and the CPUC and FRA. So HNTB is now continuing with the design. And so I'm going to note right now that Jack is joining the meeting.
Good, I did it. I got him in.
Good job, Greg.
It's a blind leading the blind.
All right, great.
All right, so I'll have him as attending at 6:07
Have
p.m.
you got him? I can't see him.
Well, he's there. He's muted. but
His
he's here.
computer is there.
You got to unmute yourself, Jack, and you got to hit the stop video. The bottom
Okay.
left-hand corner.
Okay.
I'm
So I'll
looking
continue.
forward to in-person meetings. I'll just say.
That's you.
Unmute.
There you are, Jack.
Thanks for
How do I
joining,
get
Jack.
my picture?
Hit the
So,
video, stop video, click.
well, he doesn't have his video on, which is fine. We have him attending and we appreciate his attendance. So,
Can you hear him, Jack?
I hear people.
okay, we hear you.
Watch meeting.
You're in.
Go ahead, Robert.
Okay, so additionally, the town has released a request for proposals related to architectural services for the remodel of the Atherton Station building. That request for proposals is up on our website, and we're expecting proposals due in mid-January. Attached to the
Yeah, there's a
agenda
line.
Yeah, you're on there now.
were a couple of links related to a subcommittee staff report on how they envision the station to be potentially renovated and used as a rail history to show a bit of rail history in the town of Atherton, and the staff report related to the release of the RFP. Other than that, there really hasn't been any additional action related to the RFP, or related to the station closure. Most of the physical improvements by Caltrain were done some time ago. So with that, I'm available to answer any questions.
Why don't you see if Jack's got the audio? Jack, are you getting the audio?
Yes.
Okay. Put your head up now where you're blind. We can't see your head. Your beautiful head. There we go.
Are there any questions for staff on this item? The station renovation proposal is pretty in-depth of ideas of what the council is thinking of doing. So pretty interesting report.
What is the thinking? Are they gonna tear down the old one and build a new one or what?
No.
Just reorient the opening to face the town hall instead of the train tracks. And they're
Make it a
envisioning
museum.
repurposing as a potential rail museum in there. So the building will be enclosed. We're asking the architects to make an assessment of the building so any deferred maintenance and other things can be addressed at the same time.
Good idea. Whose idea was that?
That's
Go
the
over there.
council.
Don, was that yours?
No, it wasn't mine, but if you go over there and look around, there are some rotting boards and things. There is some maintenance that needs to be done. I don't think it's not catastrophic, but it's.
No, I mean, there's dry rot, there's issues
Yeah.
with the gutter. I mean, there's just miscellaneous things. And then in addition to that, making sure that any electrical improvements or other things that are needed to facilitate its repurposing are included in that architectural scope. And so this I'll call step one of a 3 or more phase process in renovating the building. First is getting the design done. Second is getting an architect, a contractor on board to help us do the work. And then separate from that, there's going to be the effort in terms of outfitting the building and what goes inside. And so that's a separate effort from the actual building renovation. So.
And Robert, you talked about the meeting for the Watkins Crossing, and you listed a half a dozen or a dozen organizations that were all involved in the meeting. Is that going to be a big drawn out process to get that worked out and approved and everything?
Well, I'm going to say that's why the schedule is what it is, that whatever work is happening ultimately needs to be reviewed and approved by the California Public Utilities Commission, who oversees rail in the state, and the FRA. And the intent is to make sure that the improvements are done in a fashion that will facilitate the quiet zone.
Yeah.
So all of those entities and others will be involved in the quiet zone process, as you are probably familiar with what happened last time.
The completion is still in 2 years, so that's still the plan.
Why is it taking so long?
That's the process, and that's the timeline we agreed to.
You agreed to it?
Greg,
Yeah.
Greg, you worked in government a long time.
It's a safety issue. So I think
It's
the
a- yeah.
faster it's done,
Understood. And
Better.
we're working on it, and we have an agreed upon schedule with Caltrain, and we, as noted, they've engaged the CPUC and the FRA in the initial diagnostic meeting, so that we make sure that the work is done appropriately.
good, good.
Okay, any other questions or comments on 5A?
Who's gonna pay for it? Is the town or?
No, the funding has been approved through the San Mateo County Transportation Authority.
Okay,
Approved it all?
They approved up to 5 million, but the current HNTB estimated, 4 million, I'm sorry. Is it 4? I thought the contract said 5.
No, it was like 4.25, I think, for the
Okay.
total. But as you said, the original estimate by HNTB was a little over $1 million, but that didn't include a lot of things, as noted
Okay.
by Roland. I think that they're going to have, they didn't include a radar in what do you call it, intrusion detection, and a few other things. So the budget is there it should be more than sufficient to accomplish what needs to be accomplished.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Well, the only comment I make is, I remember doing my spade work several years ago about the cost of doing quad gates, and Orange County put in 11 intersections at $1 million each. So, if we want to figure out why it's going to cost us 4 to 5 million, inflation is one thing, but that magnitude is really, I don't know. I'll let you guys worry about it.
Oh, no, 4 million's our budget, but it's probably going to be it's right now budgeted somewhere between 1 to 2, I guess would be safe to say, 1 to 2 million.
Good.
Yeah. The only thing I can imagine is a little bit difficult is that we're right next to the Atherton Channel, and you might have to do something a little more difficult construction around there. Okay, moving on to 5B, the Caltrain update.
Okay, I'll give a brief start and then I will allow others to chime in who've attended meetings and other things. And so, as you know, Caltrain is continuing its work on electrification. Work is progressing along the corridor. I think I provided one of the attachments was related to electrification update from the November Caltrain meeting. And so that outlined progress. There was a special meeting yesterday that Caltrain had related to electrification. And that in that they approved a global settlement with Balfour Beatty for time extension and a variety of other things in the amount of almost $347 million and an overall budgetary increase of $462 million related to electrification. So that was approved yesterday. I don't know that, I'm going to say, according to newspaper articles, they haven't identified where all of the money is coming from, but they've agreed to that settlement with Balfour Beatty and will be looking to fill in whatever gaps that they need on that. Caltrain is proceeding on their governance discussions and are scheduled to take action, I believe, on the 12th of January with their final recommendation of I guess I'll call it the hybrid model of governance where the executive director and maybe a couple other staff people are direct employees of the board, but the majority of services are contracted through Samtrans and the TA. And so with that, I'll turn it over to our subcommittee who may want to provide some additional information and insight.
Thank you, Robert. So just a few additional details. For the additional $500 million they're spending, it's also the Balfour Beatty settlement includes the change to two-speed check that they're going to do. So that's part of why it's that change of plans they had to do to two-speed check. Balfour Beatty says it's a change of plans. And the funding wise, they are going to try to ask the state and federal government for that extra funding first before turning to any local sources. So that's their plan. In terms of what the new governance model Caltrain is thinking of, they are also planning to have the council, meaning their legal counsel and also an auditor, be independent, working for the JPB rather than relying everything on Samtrans. And of course, the executive director will also be reporting to the JPB as well, and they'll be hiring and firing that person and grading that person's performance. And then they'll share a lot of the services with Samtrans too. Upon doing that, they plan to repay San Mateo County for its, let me see how much it was, about $20 million.
19.8 or something like that.
Yeah, something close to 20.
By 20. No interest, so.
Well, without interest in 2023. And then a year later in 2024, they'll repay the interest.
Is it coming from both San Francisco and Santa Clara or just from one of them?
I think, Alex, you froze.
But in answer to your question, Jim, it is Santa Clara and San Francisco that owe the money.
Right, I know, but I thought maybe Santa Clara had paid up and San Francisco owed more. I was just curious.
That may be, I don't know that kind of
Okay.
detail, but I mean, it's San Mateo has been saying, hey, you know, we're not budging until we get paid back. And
As we should.
that's part of the deal. I frankly have been somewhat unimpressed with these discussions of governance. I mean, I don't think they've done anything very interesting. They've moved a little bit more control onto the JPB, but you know, if you listen to the JPB meeting and their discussions, I don't know what they're going to do with that control. They sort of wander around issues, and I don't know. Maybe I'm just cynical, but I've been sort of underwhelmed with their operation.
Well, you know, it's what they've done is very similar to the California Transportation Commission, where they have a commission with a staff of probably 10 or 20 people, and then Caltrans does all the work. And it's like the Samtrans. So it's a very similar. And the only thing, and I was on that commission, and you know, the legislatures would lobby us to do whatever they wanted to do in their district. But basically that was a function of the commission, was just to approve projects that went through the system. Now, I don't know what projects are going to go through Caltrains, whether it's different than the TA authority and Samtrans, whether have projects of their own. Was that clear? Are there any projects that'll be under their control?
Well, the entire Caltrain corridor will be under their control.
Interesting.
They'll
And
exercise
Samtrans-
that control through the executive director, that they will have the ability to select and hire and evaluate and fire. And that's fine. And you know, as Greg just said, they work with a staff. There's this acting director now, this Michelle Bouchard, and a whole bunch of staff reporting to her, and they're pretty good. I mean, they give coherent presentations and they're pretty detailed. But the question and oversight that they get from the board members, I think, is pretty thin. Maybe that's fine.
Yep. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry about
I know we
that.
lost you for a minute, so.
Yeah, my internet went down and not sure why. Okay, so yeah, that's about it. I wanted to cover so the biggest debate, well, one of the big debates left is what is the interest that is to be paid back, and probably San Mateo County doesn't care if it's what combination of San Francisco and Santa Clara pays them, but I imagine it'll probably be well, it's between those two how they want to split the final bill, I suppose.
Okay.
Okay, any questions or comments or additional details? Okay, if not, we'll move on to the next item. Let's see. It's 5C. And that is high-speed rail update.
Okay, so I don't have an update on that, so I'll defer to the committee.
Does
There's
anyone
gotta be
have?
something going on with Biden's infrastructure bill. The high-speed rail must have got a pile of money. But I haven't seen anything. Has anybody seen anything?
No, Greg, I haven't seen it either. I've been watching. I figure that the feds or the state are going to pump the money in once they get it. This first go around to Congress that bill, there's money for these infrastructure projects, and I think they'll try and qualify this high HSR for that. But you're right. There's been no money allocated yet.
I guess the question is, do we want to get involved? And I just don't know why we would, or what we would get involved in at this late stage, because I think the plans are pretty well set. It's just getting the money. That's the issue. Jim, is that your understanding?
Well, yeah, I've driven 99 and I own property in the valley, so I watch the thing. All this stuff is under construction. They have these big aqueduct looking things. There's no rail connecting any of them. They're having problem buying up the properties. And I attended 2 meetings last year at presentations by High Speed Rail. And the new pitch now is jobs, jobs, jobs. It's no longer we can get you to LA and so on. It's all talking about the jobs, which there's been no movement. And what I've read, that when they finally put the tracks down, they will not accommodate the real high-speed rail. It would be some sort of hybrid. And like I said before, some of my friends, I attended a cocktail party in Lodi years ago, and some of my friends over there were joking they could hardly wait to get in their pickups and drive to Madera so they could ride a stupid train to Bakersfield. I mean, nobody over there likes this thing. If you drive down 99, you'll see they've just ruined ranches and everything else. So, but I actually think the money will come from the feds because Biden, they want to make a big deal, and this is a big deal looking project. But right now, it's just been a big boondoggle.
Well, has Newsom done anything? What's his,
I haven't seen him do anything. There's been no money moved over. He initially canceled high-speed rail when he became governor right off the get-go, just like Biden canceled the Keystone Pipeline. And then Newsom has reversed himself that he is for high-speed rail, but he has not put any state money into it. They're probably waiting on a ton of money from the feds in order to do that. But I firmly believe once that comes in, either the state or the feds will continue to fund this project going to nowhere. If you do any reading about this thing, you just can think about, you probably heard it about the Tehachapi Mountains that they have to tunnel through, that one estimate would take 30 years. And then the original plan was to go down the 405 corridor, down through Anaheim and down all that way. And you can imagine how much fun they would have with that in Los Angeles. This whole thing is just, as we all know, it's just a big boondoggle. But back to the basics, I got started on the soapbox, but there's been no money allocated at this point.
I believe the last.
Let me speak up if I
Go ahead,
could.
Jim.
The essence of it is that there's the legislature and the governor are still fighting over how to spend the last $5 or $10 billion that they've got.
Yes.
And the legislature wants to spend it on essentially non-high-speed rail items, local rail, mostly in Southern California. And they were waiting, I guess, to find out, for the last, to start at the end of last year, they're waiting for the election to happen. And there was also a lawsuit pending, which is comes up a couple items later on the agenda.
Yeah.
And so when the legislature reconvenes next spring or next, January, whenever it starts, this will be an item of discussion, I'm sure. But the bottom line is that there's only enough money there to build some track in the Central Valley. There is no money there whatsoever to complete the entire project. There is no money to tunnel through the Tehachapis to get into the Los Angeles basin. There is no money to tunnel through the state park to connect Gilroy and the Central Valley. It's just not there. And there's been no allocation of federal funds in the current infrastructure bill specifically to this project. There may or may not be, but I think most of the quote high-speed rail money is going to go through infrastructure on the East Coast, where there is some high-speed rail and it could use some improvement, and there's the political will to do it. There's not the political will to do it here, and they may wind up spending $20-30 billion on the Central Valley, but they don't have the $100 to $200 billion or more that it would actually take to complete the entire project. It's not going to happen in our lifetimes, for sure.
Right.
And by the time it could happen, it's going to be totally obsolete.
It's a great synopsis, Jim. I couldn't agree with you more.
well, I guess the only question I have is whether we should try and work with Menlo Park and maybe even Palo Alto to get some money from the feds to, tie all of them together in some kind of so that they're all the same. whatever it is they do, whether it's a grade or whether it's something that makes sense, that helps the traffic situation. Because we are going to have tremendous traffic when the train ever runs, if it runs. So we need to figure out.
Well,
That is the next item, 5D.
yeah,
that is?
the
Yeah.
issue there, Greg, right now is running the electrified Caltrain. And that's the issue about grade separations in those towns. But high-speed rail is just sort of piggybacked on that. And I think they're keeping a low profile there for the time being.
Remember, their pitch is jobs, jobs, jobs.
Yeah,
Who's
that's right.
the president of Caltrain, of the high-speed rail now? Is Richard still around?
No,
You know, I don't know.
he's still around, but he's not chairman anymore.
Is he on the board?
I don't think so. I'm not sure.
Because I thought he was going to take the bull by the horns and do something, but I'm not sure what. But
Well, he's
didn't
not
do it.
either, I think.
So why don't we move on to 5D then, since we're interested in talking about the neighboring jurisdictions. I think this is mine, is it not, Robert?
That's correct.
Okay, so when I originally asked to get this on, Menlo Park was going to have a rail committee meeting after a couple of years of not having one, but they have canceled it. But the staff report from that, was a result of that city budgeting some money for a quiet zone feasibility study throughout the city, as well as including possibly funding a Palo Alto Avenue one, which is just across the border. And obviously the sound from the horn, train horn, will affect them. So they were interested in studying all of those, possibly creating a continuous quiet zone if they can get quad gates or something else to remediate the safety concerns. But they never had the meeting. They canceled it. It's not clear when they're going to have an update for that, but they have budgeted this fiscal year $75,000 to do the study. So there is interest, and so we'll see. I'll keep an eye out on their future rail subcommittee meetings, see if they'll meet again and actually recommend to go ahead with that, to spend that money on the study, to study all 4 crossings that they have to make them possible quiet zones.
Well, they've been going around and around on this for years. And they never seem to drop anything out, but they don't make any decisions. The latest thing they've presumably put forward is closing Churchill.
Oh, that's Palo Alto.
Yeah, well, it's part of the same process. Menlo Park is just an extension of that. And we're fortunate in that we have just 2 crossings and they're easily dealt with. But,
Yeah, Menlo Park did engage in a study to do grade separation of 3 of the 4 crossings, but that is much longer term, because the money for that is not going to be found anytime soon. This particular study is just for quiet zone. So they're not going to change the grade. They're just going to look at possibly putting quad gates or whatever else that might be able to do cost effectively to make a continuous quiet zone throughout Menlo Park. And the importance for Atherton is, of course, that a lot of Atherton surrounds the grade crossings at Encinal and Oak Grove and such. So it will help our residents as well, even though it's all in Menlo Park proper. Any other questions or comments?
I just think that somehow there's a lot of federal money there someplace. And if we could get a unified position between Menlo and Atherton and Palo Alto to do a grade separation below ground, it would really help our traffic situation when the high-speed rail runs, if it ever runs. If they have 8 trains an hour, what is it? 4 trains an hour or
8
8?
8 Caltrain trains plus 4 high-speed rail trains.
12 trains an hour.
Yeah.
Well, I
Picture
think
that
that,
if you
we
can.
can't ignore that. If it's going to happen. We may not be around to see it, but it's going to happen. And I think we need to have our vision with that in mind, because if this committee has any role, it would be to figure out how to deal with those 12 trains an hour, and whether it's going to jam up our Fair Oaks for sure, and cause traffic problems that they're not going to be happy with.
Well, I want to make a comment. Greg, I understand the traffic problems, but I think under no condition should this committee or the town of Atherton get involved with the politics of Palo Alto or Menlo Park, particularly Palo Alto, who initially supported high-speed rail until they went, oh my God, it's going to take out half of the football field. And what are we going to do about the big tree that is the city of Palo Alto? Their politics are such a mix. We need to completely stay away from it and tend to the traffic's going to be, I totally agree with that. But I don't think, unless you're going to do it, I don't want anything to do with that Palo Alto City Council or the Menlo Park City Council with the district situation.
Well, but if they're going to do the same thing, we should at least be aware, because it makes sense for us to be part of it. Because, Menlo, Palo Alto, and Atherton are a same level.
I agree, but who's going to be part of it? What can we do? We're a small city. The only thing I think we should be able to do is recommend to them how to do a quiet zone properly and about what it should cost, as you had pointed out about Orange County, because hopefully we will end up with 2 quiet zones and we can show them this is what needs to be done. But as Paul was remarking, the situation in Churchill in South Palo Alto, they have flip-flopped on that. We're about to destroy the Southgate neighborhood. And also part of that area down there has homes that sell for the same value as Atherton in a neighborhood. There's a couple listings down there for $40 million off of Churchill. So once again, I caution strongly about staying away from the politics of Menlo Park and Palo Alto, other than to advise them on how to do a quiet zone. Unless you're going to do it, Greg, and go get the money, send me some. I'm a retired guy.
Well, I think that's the thing. If Biden starts throwing the money around, I want to make sure we catch our share as much as
catching our share is different than taking on, getting involved in Palo Alto, Menlo Park politics. I'll take all of our share we can get.
I don't want to get too far off topic on, this is just a discussion of neighboring cities and what they're doing. If any committee members want to get together with some other committee members, as long as you don't have a quorum, you guys can, you guys have subcommittees too, so you guys can work with your own subcommittees in terms of putting something together. If you have other like-minded folks that want to research into something and possibly put together a proposal for the committee to vote on and to look at. So if there's no more comments on 5D, why don't we move on to the litigation update?
Tim, are you able to provide an update on that?
Are you talking to me?
Yes.
Jim.
Yeah,
Sorry?
let's hear Jim first, and then I've got a couple of comments.
All right, so on October 25th, the Court of Appeals heard the appeal of the ruling against the Community Coalition on High-Speed Rail, the town of Atherton, the TOS, and a couple other individuals. And they had 90 days to give their ruling, and they came down with the ruling about 2 weeks ago and upheld the ruling of the initial court. And it's now, the issue was whether or not state law 1889, which allocated funds from the bond measure, whether it was in violation of the Constitution or not, on the theory, on our theory that the state constitution prohibits spending funds except as explicitly provided in the bond measure that the voters approve for. And they took the position that, well, it's close enough. And essentially that's the best way to sum it up. And now we've got a week or two left in which we could file an appeal if the plaintiffs decide to do that. Quentin Kopp is also one of the plaintiffs, by the way. I forgot the former head of the High-Speed Rail Authority, who caused the entire process the Great Train Robbery. But that's where it stands. So I can tell you that as president of the Community Coalition on High-Speed Rail, we are considering whether or not to support going forward with an appeal to the Supreme Court. That would, like I say, have to happen within the next week or two.
US Supreme Court?
No, the state Supreme Court. And I guess I'll leave it at that. Oh, I know. What I was going to say is that there's two things. One is whether or not the state Supreme Court would take the hearing, which they ought to, because it's pretty fundamental. And if we go forward with it, we would try to get some amicus supporters to write letters to the Supreme Court saying they should take the case, because it's a fundamental question. On the law right now, the state law, is that the legislature in the state has no authority to change the will of the voters on a bond measure. And for example, if you approve a bond measure to build a rail line, you can't use the money to improve airports, for example, even though the ultimate goal might be accomplished the same way. You just can't do it. And there are precedents that say that that's essentially the case. Our argument has been that spending the money piecemeal on a little project, like Caltrain project here, some projects in Southern California, this and that, and the Central Valley, taken together, doesn't comply with the Bond Act, which required that monies not be spent until it's all available. That complete operating segments must be built at a time, so that you don't wind up with pieces of construction here and there, nothing linked together, and nothing working together. But like I said, it's a 20-page opinion, but in essence, it sort of says, look, this is close enough. They're all working towards the same goal. Someday, billions and billions of dollars arrive from somewhere, they might actually link it all together and create a high-speed rail project. So it's good enough. And the challenge to the Supreme Court would be, is this really what the voters voted for? And so the Supreme Court would have to take the case. And frankly, our attorneys, Stu Flashman, is telling us that the odds of them taking the case are probably pretty small. But nevertheless, the issue is whether we should make that appeal. And then if they decide to take it, then it becomes a question of whether they might do the same thing that the trial court did and the appellate court did, which is just to gloss it over and say it's close enough. So we'll see.
There's no federal concerns, is there? Is the state Supreme Court is the last stop?
I'm not aware of any federal concerns. No, I agree.
Okay.
I mean, there may be separate federal concerns, whether they're actually, spending the federal funds that they receive, whether they're actually spending those legitimately and so forth. But those have not been part of the lawsuit, and they don't go to the heart of the matter.
Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I read the court's finding fairly carefully, and the impression I got from the entire process is that the court had decided what their decision was at the outset and sent their clerks out to generate a bunch of information on projects that had been publicly funded where there were changes more radical than what the High-Speed Rail Authority is doing. They even dipped back and got the Erie Canal and said that there were changes in that after the work was started. And that, it was just a whitewash job. And I found it very upsetting to read this, and they as Jim said, they just said it's good enough and that's all we want to do. It's a very disappointing thing. I put many, many hours into working against this thing over the years, and it's hard to give up.
Are there any other questions or comments? Oh, and want to recognize that our council member Hawkins Mamillion is here. Welcome, Diana.
Hi, everyone. I apologize. I was stuck in the waiting room, so forgive me.
Sorry, Diane, I didn't see you in there, so I apologize.
And George joined us briefly until he realized where he was, and then he left.
No, I think he helped Diana get in the meeting.
Oh, I see. Anyone have any questions or comments?
You know, it's kind of sad that you've got a legislature of congressmen and women in California, probably 40 of which are in control now in the Congress out of 53 or 55, whatever it is. And if you're ever going to get some funding to do something, if you could figure out what to do, this would probably be the time, because I don't think a Republican legislation would ever fund it. So if they're ever going to do something differently, maybe than what they've played out, it seems to me that now would be the time, because I think that there's so much money in that infrastructure bill that they could build a Taj Mahal and afford it. So it's very disappointing to me. Now, I guess the only thing we could do is talk to Anna Eshoo or even Jackie Spear and say, hey, guys, do you have any interest in trying to get something to happen? Or are you just let's let it go on until it dies?
Don't go to Anna Eshoo. I tried several times to approach her and she just was not interested. I haven't voted for her since.
Well, we've got a candidate or two against her, so they could make an issue out of it, that you're a lack of interest, but that's not going to do anything.
Anna thinks she solved the problem by coming up with us with the blended concept, the blended rail concept.
That wasn't her idea
let's-
by any means.
Yeah, let's try to stay on topic, guys. The litigation, if we can.
Sorry.
No problem.
Jim, is there need for this council to say anything regarding the appeal, or?
Well, the town of Atherton is a plaintiff, so I'm sure Stuart Flashman, our attorney, will approach them and see what their opinion is on going forward. At this point, Flashman has been doing all the work pro bono, because if we had won, then he could collect attorney's fees, since a public entity, the town of Atherton, is one of the plaintiffs, and then he would get paid. But if it's nothing, if it's lose, he's not going to get paid. So his position is that he will only go forward if someone's willing to pay him. And the Community Coalition on High Speed Rail appears willing to do that, but we haven't made an official determination on that yet. Because the little additional it would cost to get to write a petition to the Supreme Court to take the case, and even if he has to prepare a brief for the Supreme Court, compared to all the time he's already put in, the little additional that would cost is not all that much. And Quentin Comp, I'm told, thinks we ought to appeal it, although he hasn't offered to put up any money. I don't know how the town of Atherton would feel about it.
Well, do you have any advice? I mean, if Flashman is saying he thinks the chances of the Supreme Court taking it are somewhere between slim and none, I mean, I personally don't have any basis for recommending one way or the other.
Well, I think that it's an abomination to say that what AB 1889, what the legislative actions have done with the high-speed rail money, it's an abomination to say that that's proper, and they're just glossing over the fact that it's just totally not what the citizens approved. I mean, if the bond measure had been, are you willing to sell $10 billion in bonds to build a few rail improvements in Northern California, some in Southern California, and a bunch of structures in Central Valley, which Fresno may be the only entity that really profits from this because they get the rail. Apparently, it's crisscrossed at the surface by a lot of rail lines crossing roads, and they might get some of those taken off the surface and put up on structures, but it's not going to be a high-speed rail project. And so I think the issue is still there, and I feel it's incumbent upon the plaintiffs to at least to carry it through to the end. We're so close to a fine. If we just drop it now, now I'm speaking as a member of the board of the Community Coalition on High Speed Rail. If we just drop it now, I don't think we will have carried out our mandate.
Well, how much money are you talking about, Jim?
About $3,000 for the appeal and up to $10,000 to write the brief.
Is our council member still on?
Yes, I had a question, actually. I'm wondering if this has been seen by the city of Atherton's attorney already?
I'm sure he's seen the decision. I would hope so.
Well, I think, Jim, as you had indicated, Stuart Fleischman is probably reaching out through either the city manager or otherwise to have any sort of discussion. And it would likely, because it's an item of litigation that the town is involved in, if considered by the council, it might initially start in a closed session and then migrate to public.
Mm-hmm.
So the procedure for us to make any sort of reaction to this would be for it to go to get on the agenda for a closed session, and then we discuss, and our attorney would then give us feedback?
I would presume so. I mean, this committee is just here for providing some information and recommendations to council on various items, but not necessarily litigation. And this is just, since there was the appellate court hearing or the appeals court hearing and finding, this is just the item on the agenda was an update to the committee on where things landed on that.
No, but we could make a recommendation to the council. We were the ones that started the lawsuit because I remember the meeting very well. And it was a rail committee who started the litigation back in year one, whatever year that was. And I just think that if we think it should go ahead, I think we could make a recommendation to the council that we think they should, for $13,000, finish what you started. We started, nobody else, the committee.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to point out. Unfortunately 5E is not an action item, so we can't vote on any or recommend any action. We can bring it back in February to have a recommendation on an action, but I don't think we can.
Well, our council member could make a comment to the council based on what she heard, whether she agrees with it or not.
I will absolutely do a report back at our next meet on what I learned tonight. So I'm allowed to give a report back. So I'll give a report back on this issue. Did I hear that it was time sensitive? I apologize. I got in late, so I didn't hear all the conversations. So forgive me, and I'll try to watch the recording of this later. But did I hear you say it was time sensitive to try to do an appeal?
It is. I think that he could file a appeal for rehearing at the appellate court level, which will probably be rejected, but that would buy us a little bit of time, not much.
What is the time frame? I'm just trying to understand. If I report back at our next meeting, then it's got to go through our pipes. So I'm wondering if we can make it move remotely through for discussion in your time frame. So when would the appeal have to go in if we were to agree to put some money or effort toward it?
Hold on, I may have something on my laptop here that answers that question.
It would normally be 30 days, wouldn't it, Jim?
Yes, I think that, and I think it was November 26th. I think, when the ruling came down.
So
Or
right
maybe it
before
was the
Christmas.
22nd or 23rd, something like that. Let me just see if I can find it.
While he's looking for that, can I ask another question? How will I be able to see the recording of the earlier part of this meeting that I missed?
After we record, I'd presume that we'd be able to get this would be on our on the town YouTube channel.
Okay,
And it'll be posted before the end of the week.
fantastic. Thank you.
You got till Christmas to file.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I just looked at where I thought I might find the answer, and it's not there.
Well,
So-
the date on the finding is filed 11/30/2021.
Okay, so I think we've got till December 30th, and as I say, if we file an appeal for a rehearing at the appellate court, I think that buys us another week or so.
Okay.
And
Any
you
other,
think you could get him to do that on his own nickel? Because that wouldn't be a couple.
Well,
pieces.
I think before then, there's a good chance that the community coalition will tell them to go ahead and do it. And they'll come up with the 3,000 for the.
I think.
And actually, Greg, I think you're right. I think he wasn't going to charge for that, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Matthew?
we certainly ought to remunerate Stu in some fashion for all the time and energy he's put into this right along.
Well,
Well-
a lot of other people too.
Yeah.
Well, he's been the front man and he's done his job well.
Well,
Jim
who's the other
Massey,
guy that
Jim.
usually reports back to us? He did a lot of work too.
Mike Brady.
Yeah, Mike Brady. Is he still with us?
I haven't talked to Mike for some time.
So he's still around.
He's still around. Okay.
Any other comments related to the litigation update? If not, we can move on to committee and staff member comments. Are there any committee members or anyone who wants to find any comments?
Well, for the benefit of our council member, I just think because she wasn't on the program, but I'd like to make the one point I made earlier, that I think that the council or the city needs to be aware that we're talking about 12 trains an hour when the high-speed rail is functioning, and that's going to really tie up traffic in Atherton. And, you know, it's in spite of the fact that it may never happen, I think that, you know, we need to be aware of it and stay on top of it. And at least if there's any money thrown around to help us bury the rail so that it doesn't cause traffic congestion in Atherton, that we should at least be thinking of it.
Well, there's some very interesting problems that Caltrain has not properly addressed. They have ordered all these cars that have high and low platforms. And in fact, when you talk to the high-speed rail people, they're going to have separate high-speed rail platforms in Millbrae and San Jose, as well as separate in San Francisco. So this Caltrain is stuck with these messed up cars that will not be needed when they try and put them into service.
Who, the high-speed rail or Caltrains?
Caltrain.
Crazy. That's all I had.
Any other comments from the committee? Seeing,
My
don't worry about
sentiments
that. That's
exactly.
just public comment.
It sounds like the meeting is about to come to an end.
It's bath time for someone. Seeing no members of the public, we have no public comment. Any future agenda items for our February meeting that anyone wants to
I think we ought to
suggest?
keep the legislative issue alive in
Okay.
February.
Okay, we'll leave that
Wait.
on.
Which issue, Jack? Or
The litigation, you mean?
The litigation, whether we're going to
allocation, okay.
appeal.
It should be decided by February though, right? So it will just be kind of acknowledgement if we,
It should be, but
yeah.
I think we ought to address it because we still have an interest in it.
Okay.
We probably will want an update on what Caltrain is doing. They will have made their governance recommendation by then.
Mhm.
No.
No, moving on.
They will have made the recommendation, does not mean it will have been implemented.
Well, that's true, but
Okay,
I'm just suggesting an update, that's all.
Sounds good. So next meeting will be February 1st in the new year, maybe at the town center, but we'll see.
Yeah, I hope so. They're having an open house on Saturday.
Yeah, 1 to 3.
Hope you're all coming.
I'm gonna be out of town.
I'll
I
be there.
can't make it.
Uh,
All right.
Motion to adjourn, anyone?
You got any more takers for dinner, John?
No, I asked you, Paul, you want to join us if we're gonna do it?
I can't tonight, thank you. I
What about
will-
you, Jim?
Anybody else?
I'm in Carmel.
To adjourn?
You wanna come down here?
I'm waiting for a motion to adjourn. I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We'll see you guys in February.
Okay, so
right,
Greg, are we
take
gonna
care.
meet?
Thanks, Alex. Good
February?
meeting,
Thank
Alex.
you, Alex.
Merry Christmas.